Hi, I'm Justin Kale, an economist, researcher, and connector of three worlds, academia, policy, and business, that don't talk to each other nearly enough. Welcome to From Ideas to Innovation, a podcast dedicated to providing in-depth conversations with entrepreneurs, academics, and policymakers who've been talking past each other for way too long.
It wasn't quite like that for me. It was like when you go and work for yourself, it's not like some great opportunity, comes up. A lot of days I go to work and it's kind of like getting punched in the face multiple times during the day. And then we just...
In this episode, we talked to Alex Cartwright. We had a great conversation about his company HotelShift, housing regulations, NIMBYism, and how to provide a more abundant housing future. Alex Cartwright is the principal of HotelShift, a hotel-to-apartment conversion company. Alex provides macroeconomic analysis on target markets and conducts the underwriting for HotelShift's offerings. He's an experienced multifamily investor and has led as general partner on multiple syndications. Alex was the chair of the management department and associate professor of economics in the College of Business at Ferris State University. Alex received his BS in mathematical economics from Hampton-Sydney University. He earned an MA and PhD in economics from George Mason University. Well, Alex, thank you for joining From Ideas to Innovation.
My pleasure to be here, Justin. Very excited about it. Congratulations on this podcast, and I'm really excited to contribute to it.
Oh yeah, we're very excited to have you on. You occupy some interesting worlds, so I definitely want to dive into that. But first, let's kind of take a step back about you and kind of your story. So you have a PhD in economics. So what was that trajectory to getting that PhD? Was there a sort of light bulb moment that you decided, okay, I want to pursue this. This is something I want to do?
There was. And there definitely was. I always liked economics. I took my first economics course in high school, and it stuck with me. I took an economics class the first semester of college, and it was very influential with me. I'm analytical. I like that economics is very logical. It's a toolkit that you can use to look at any number of problems. My wife does a good job of describing it as a lens. I think that's a great metaphor for it. So I love that. And when I was a sophomore, I was taking a class, law and economics, and my professor suggested that I consider going to a summer seminar and that I would maybe think about grad school in economics. She says, "You really like economics, and I can tell that you're very good at it. Like, have you ever thought about going to graduate school?" And I said, "No, I hadn't. I was thinking of going to law school. I was pretty set on that." And we had some conversations where she said, "Well, why is it that you want to go to law school?" And I said, "Well, I had gone to this summer program in DC, took some classes at Georgetown, and when I was there, went out to lunch with attorneys at different law firms, and this one attorney took me back to his office, and he says, our firm has the largest conference room in all of DC. This conference room is larger than any government conference room. And our attorneys bill at this much per hour. We have this and we have that," and told me all these impressive things about their firm. So I was pretty impressed. And I repeated to my advisor, "I'm going to law school and I've got friends that work at XYZ law firm. Do you know they have the largest private conference room?" And she's like, "Yeah, and who cares?" And I'm like, "Well, that's pretty cool, right? Like, that's a pretty prestigious place to work." And she's like, she said a few curse words, which were, and she's like, "I don't really have time for students like you, and you can get out of my office." And I was like, and I thought, what did I do that was wrong? Don't have time for students like me. I'm like the top student in the class. I'm following all the rules. And then so that started a period of reflection about which goals were really mine, what was my real interest versus just other things that other people thought were very desirable or very prestigious versus or other things I was encouraged to do versus where my own interests were. And I continued to study economics, kept thinking about law school, but ultimately I wanted to go to George Mason. This is not a very good strategy, but that's the only school I applied to. I was going to maybe take a job for a year. I had applied for a job at an investment firm, and I thought, if I don't get into George Mason, I'm not sure I want to go. But thank goodness I got into George Mason. It's where I wanted to go. I was the F.A. Hayek Fellow. I got to study with all the Austrian public choice, institutional economics type folks, and I had a great experience. And so pretty much when I decided to major in economics and go to grad school in undergrad, I had decided that I wanted a career in academia. I was always doing different entrepreneurial things. I liked that in academia. There was a lot of flexibility to be involved tangentially, consulting, or you could do different things on the side, and that was possible, if even celebrated. But I had the intention, even in undergrad, to go into academia.
Yeah, I kind of had a very similar story, not debating law school and academia per se, but basically the decision of, well, do I want to give up basically 4 to 5 years worth of income to go make much less to go be a grad student somewhere? And that's I mean, it's obviously a tough decision. And like you said, with law school specifically, when you probably heard what the billable hours were from that attorney, and, it's hard to not be interested whenever you hear those numbers. You're like, oh, that's quite attractive. So, but you ended up making the choice to go into academia. So what was your research in grad school, and once you became a professor? Like, what was the type of questions you were interested in, and why?
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. I have not thought about articulating. You go in the job market, everyone's like, well, what is your research? And I say, well, my research questions are 1, 2, and 3. And my dissertation is about 1, 2, and 3. I have not had to answer this question for several years. This is not something I've thought about in the last couple of years. So I appreciate you telling me in advance that you might ask me that question. I maybe I would answer this. Maybe I answered this question a little bit differently in the past, but my interest was always around institutions, rule of law, where rule of law comes from, how it gets formed, what continues to make rule of law legitimate, and exactly the institutional structures that can protect rule of law and therefore lead to economic growth. So everything that I wrote and thought about was ultimately about the legitimacy of rules, some kind of analysis of rules or law, and thinking about the incentives that institutions produce and the economic outcomes. So now that all sounds extremely academic and abstract. I'll give you an example. I thought one of the chapters of my dissertation and the paper that I'm most proud of, even though it's not necessarily published in the most prestigious place that I've published a paper, is a paper about contract law and the interaction between contract law and economic growth. And I wrote about the role that entrepreneurs play in creating new contract law. So that sounds pretty abstract and academic. Let me give you an example. Think about Uber, right, as a product. Think about what's going on there. When you reserve an Uber car, you are buying a type of property right, like a ticket. That property right is contingent on a time and place. You don't have the right to resell that ticket. You've got a right to go on a ride in that car, but you don't have use. You've got these use rights that are defined to like the backseat ride, but you don't have transfer rights. You can't sell the car during your ride. You don't have cash flow rights. You can't resell it for a higher price and arbitrage the difference. And you've got all these different warranties and protections. So that specific set of property rights, an Uber ride with all of those contingencies, that price, it's on a time and place, certain amount of warranties. Some parts of the car are yours only for a period of time and they're contingent on behavior. Like that very specific type of property right, that was not codified in any constitution or any legislation. Like that property right was dreamed up by an entrepreneur. And so we need a legal system where the entrepreneur can dream up a new type of property right. And and we say that entrepreneurs are reacting to prices. And what I thought a lot about is how, well, the entrepreneur needs to be able to dream up a property right and then put that property right on the market and see what feedback they get in how that property right gets priced. And then you go back and change the property right a little bit and see how it gets repriced. So entrepreneurs have got to be able to create new types of property rights. You might even say new bundles of existing property rights. And the legal system has got to support that, this kind of contract law. And common law does exactly this kind of thing in most cases. And so I wrote about the role that entrepreneurs play in being able to create new property rights and how that's important to price discovery, and how institutions that supported that saw more dynamic entrepreneurship, better economic growth, etc. That's kind of the quintessential thing that I would write about and think about. And I even think about what we're doing, today professionally is like fundamentally creating new types of property rights and looking at where the market is mispricing certain types of property rights and rebundling them and getting them repriced.
Yeah, no, I just find, given when there is someone who is in academia and they move on to other avenues, venues, that, it's an interesting process to kind of see like how they move from that. We'll get into more of that later. But I'm curious. So you made that shift from academia to entrepreneurship by starting and co-founding HotelShift. So we'll talk about HotelShift itself in a second. But at what point did you start thinking, I should be doing this in real estate rather than just kind of writing about housing?
There was not a light bulb moment there, right? I was always interested in real estate. I was involved in different real estate projects while I was a professor, and I was doing some consulting for some bigger groups, and I started doing a little bit larger investing as I was a professor. But I never did I imagine that I was going to leave my job and be in real estate full time. I never. It was certainly not my intention. And when you're a young assistant professor, everyone wants to write their articles, do a good job teaching, and get tenure, right? So that's what I was focused on. And the different real estate investments I was making, that was just for myself, right? For personal financial security. And it was fun, it was challenging, but it was not born of some aspiration to have a career shift. And there was never really a light bulb moment where some student threw an egg on me or something, and I thought, I can't do this job anymore, right? That didn't happen. I loved teaching. I was on fire for teaching for a lot of years, and I was winning awards teaching. I was taking students abroad every year. Some years I was taking students abroad multiple times a year, and it's not like I was even looking for jobs at other schools. I liked the school where I was, and I got tenure there. I was the department chair, and thought about if I wanted to be in other positions in higher ed leadership. And I was very, very, very fulfilled living the life of the mind and trying to help other students become more curious and better critical thinkers and help them in their career. Like it was not like I was going to a job that I disliked year after year, day after day, and thinking about how can I make a big shift in my life. It was frankly completely the opposite. I was completely content with my professional life as a professor.
No, that makes sense to me. Yeah, because I didn't make the same shift you did, but making the shift from academia to the think tank world, I was, it wasn't even necessarily that I had a problem where I was. I liked where I was. I liked my colleagues. I enjoyed teaching. It just, the opportunity came up, and sometimes, there's no, you leave not because where you were was bad in any way, but just because the new opportunity was just too good to pass up and too good to not take on. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of which, let's get into some housing specifically, and then we could talk about HotelShift specifically.
That was great. I just can't help but comment. You're like this other great opportunity came up. I mean, it wasn't quite like that for me. It was like when you go and work for yourself, it's not like some great opportunity, comes up. A lot of days I go to work and it's kind of like getting punched in the face multiple times during the day, and then we just somehow figure out how to solve all these problems, and we go back the next day and we do it anyway. And it's way harder, right, physically and emotionally, mentally, than being in academia. We understand as economists that fundamentally entrepreneurs get paid to bear uncertainty, and you certainly get paid in proportion with the kind of uncertainty that you can bear. And bearing uncertainty is very uncomfortable a lot of days. And that requires a lot of perseverance and practice and courage. And I don't know that I really appreciated quite how difficult it is in the beginning to live through the ups and downs of the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. But there's some part of me that is an entrepreneur at heart, that really wants to take risk, that likes to take risk, that's proud of the risks that I've taken and how it panned out afterwards. And there's some desire for relevance that I just couldn't quite get in academia. And I'll tell you a moment that this was not a light bulb moment, but there's a moment I think about a lot, a couple moments I think about a lot as an academic. I remember one time going to Cuba, and we went on this cruise. And you could get off the cruise ship and go on a tour of Havana, which is why I went on the cruise. And when we went on the tour of Havana, the lady that gave us the tour, she took us to this square where Castro started a big chant, and where this revolution happened, and he gave a big speech, and she's going on and on, giving us this very impassioned version of Cuban communist history. She's clearly bought into the regime and the system. And the whole time that she's there, literally almost jumping and waving her arms, speaking so emotionally with so much enthusiasm for communism in Cuba, she's holding her iPhone like this, right? Like she's got her iPhone in her hand as she's talking. And I said to her afterwards, I said, you have an iPhone and those guys are capitalists. And she's like, yeah, well, they're part of the good guys. And I thought, even this brainwashed tour guide that her job is to sing the praises of Cuban communism all day long to tourists, even she knows that Apple products help people, right? And I thought to myself, this lady could sit with me for 16 weeks in economics 101, or a principles class of economics, and I could painstakingly take her through some basics of price theory. And we could talk about Hayek, right? And we could talk about calculation problems and coordination problems, etc. But I don't know that at the end of the 16 weeks, I would change her mind. But her experience with the free market via her iPhone, that certainly changed her mind, that business could be a force for good and that it could make products that really help people. And it made me think a lot about how people's firsthand experience, not the academic filter that they're able to put stuff through. And I'm not trying to discount their academic filter and their ability to become good critical thinkers, but for a lot of people that are less intellectual, their firsthand experience is a big formation on their worldview. And I thought, I'm never getting through to people like that as a professor. And similarly, I taught at this kind of vanilla state university. The most popular major is business management. People would graduate in business and get some business degree. They'd go get some entry-level job. They'd make 40, 50 grand a year. And then they'd not go and buy a BMW, but want to go and buy their first or rent their first apartment, not have a roommate. And all of a sudden, more than 30% of their post-tax income has gone to rent. Maybe 40% has gone to rent. And they think, well, this rent control stuff doesn't seem so bad. Like this Zoran Mamdani stuff doesn't seem so bad. This Bernie Sanders socialism doesn't seem so bad. And they would have amnesia about what we learned in Economics 201. I mean, they understood at some level that you don't want to run the whole economy that way, but they didn't. I felt like they didn't really understand the lesson that I was trying to impart with them. So there is certainly, it deeply appeals to me to be able to create some long lasting change and and produce a product like affordable housing that has a huge impact on people's lives, and use the free market to do it, right? That's highly relevant. The risk that I have to take on to do that all seems highly worthwhile, highly admirable, and like it's going to be of consequence. And this is not at all and I don't mean to sound like I'm creating some kind of rank order between doing intellectual work versus doing more entrepreneurial work. I'm not. I saw an opportunity that I felt very compelled to take advantage of, and I think that it's gonna be highly relevant for how a lot of people live their lives. And certainly the intellectual foundation of wanting to provide a free market solution to something like housing, that's a big motivation for why I thought up the solution that I did, converting hotels to housing. And that's a big motivation for why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two anecdotes off of that I want to jump to quickly. One, when you're talking about kind of the comparisons of getting into entrepreneurship and just every day feels like getting punched in the face in some direction. I actually had a friend who has a startup, and they were talking about, what was it like going from like a more traditional 9 to 5 to that. And he said, I feel more like a professional boxer. So I thought that example you gave is pretty comparable there. That it just feels like, all right, well, you never know where you're going to get hit from. You're going to get hit at some point, and you just hope that you have the solutions and you have the good team and good support systems around you to weather those punches and be able to keep pushing forward. And especially if you're doing something that I believe has great value in the marketplace, such as HotelShift. I think that's definitely admirable in its own way. And the second thing is kind of on what you were saying about kind of, the decision of, again, not rank order comparing, but there's room for all of these in the marketplace, right? There's room for people to do all of these sorts of different avenues, and they all play their important role. And a recent conversation I had in episode 4 was talking with Alexander McCoben at Liberty Ventures. And he was talking about, he kind of had a similar background from us where he was interested in more the idea sector, and that was kind of where he wanted to go to get his philosophy PhD. But at the end of the day, he had this opportunity to start Students for Liberty and start working with John Mackey at Conscious Capitalism, and then start his own thing at Liberty Ventures and Principled Business, and really try to build that network through his own ways. So I think there's something to someone who is, I guess what I'm trying to say is someone who is like curious about ideas. There's also like a predisposition to be interested in kind of this, because in some ways academia, you in many ways you are taking risk in some point of like, all right, well, is this research project going to pay off? Is this the direction I should be going in? Is teaching this specific way something I should do? And do I, want to continue doing this? And then how do I adjust basically if this thing doesn't work? So I think there is a good through line of people who are interested, just more intellectually curious and interested in these types of ideas, to then still have very promising avenues in other sectors, I guess, is at the end of the day.
I think that's right. I think one thing that is the one thing that's radically different is like if you could give me a list of what it takes to be successful in academia, right? Like do this kind of research, get in these journals, right? Get these kind of teaching reviews, right? Do X, Y, Z. And if you fail at it, do it again and again. There's some rules to a certain extent. There's a formula, and you can get external feedback from your peers, and they can give you accurate feedback about what they think of your performance. Whereas, like in my world now, I make the rules, right? There's constantly people telling me, you can't do X, you can't do Y, you can't do Z, it's not a good idea. And there is no like standard out there in terms of a 5-year path that we're supposed to follow or with we're judged on. We've got like entrepreneurs really just have to look within themselves and trust their gut and use their own judgment. So that requires a like a really deep level of confidence and self-assurance that I don't know that you can get in, or that other people that aren't entrepreneurs don't experience, right? It's like a totally new level of uncertainty where you've got to create the rules that you follow and hold yourself to your own standards. And that means that, and this has been a big shift for me, you have to start really caring a lot less about what other people say and think, and about what their opinions are. I mean, most people are not gonna they don't they think that your business is gonna fail, or they don't like it, and you don't try and sell them on the vision. You just well, they're not the right partner, they're not the right customer, whatever, and you move on. And so that is it is like, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but in some senses, like it's different in the toughest ways.
Yeah, you can't like to that point. You can't, or I guess you could, but you shouldn't tell a student like, I don't want to teach you anymore. like not interested in talking. Like, okay, this isn't getting through. Move on, right? In this world, obviously, like you said, you kind of set the rules. And going to that point, that actually brings us nicely into housing laws, how zoning rules, etc. How you're saying like, oh, you have people saying like, oh, you can't do X and Y. In many ways, I'm assuming a lot of those rules come from housing regulations. So we hear all the time about this kind of conventional story that the U.S. has a housing supply problem. You're seeing this especially with the rise of like the abundance movement from Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. And we just, the idea is that we just don't build enough. Do you buy the diagnosis?
That we don't build enough. Yeah, that is a big part of the problem. I mean, people, of course, have to be able to afford what is there, but it's pretty undeniable that we're not building enough. Now, is that the only thing that we need to get better on? Is that the main thing? It probably is the main thing, but just look at the rate at which we're building single-family housing today. It's pretty much the same pace that we did in 1995. You look at the rate at which we're building multifamily. That's pretty much on par with where it was in the early 80s. And a couple things you got to understand about the supply and demand for housing. Number one, housing stock is not permanent, meaning houses wear out. They get dilapidated. Right? Ultimately, they get torn down. They don't get remodeled, or it's more expensive to remodel them. So it's not like once this housing is produced, it's just there. Like the stock does need to be replenished. So this is one thing to keep in mind. The second thing is that demand for housing does not move in lockstep with population, either growth or decline, and that's really for two reasons. One is that you have demand for housing just because people want to live in different places of the world and in proximity to different demand generators, right? Different amenities that didn't exist before. And the last thing is that demand for housing is fundamentally driven by what we call household formation. So that's demand for addresses. So now we've got people getting married a lot later. That means that there's a lot more demand for rental homes, and there are a lot more single person households than there ever were before. You don't have as much intergenerational living as you had before. You've got young people that move out of their parents' homes earlier than they did before, right? All of that creates additional demand for housing that's not necessarily tied to population growth. But at a very crude high level, are we building enough? No. Now, the stuff that is getting built is not always affordable. Separate issue that we can dig into, but to say that we're chronically undersupplied on housing just doesn't even. I almost can't put words. I don't even know what the right metaphor is to describe to you how undersupplied we are on housing. And even in the markets, places like Dallas, Denver, Atlanta, kind of Sunbelt markets where we have seen the biggest increases in apartment supply on record, which we saw 2022 into 2025 because of all these new construction projects that were financed with ultra low interest rates. even in that record supply, you see rents go down in the single digits. And basically all that supply got absorbed. Like the demand the demand for housing is durable and it's there and we need more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree on all of those fronts. I think that you can't explain everything, but like you said, at a high level, it sure explains a lot. And I think it also is important to talk about the kind of secondary effects of what's going on and why, demand shifts. Why are people, wanting, or what they're in situations, or why they prefer certain aspects? Like, again, if they're getting married later in life, well, then of course you're probably not many people are buying a house until they're married for the most part. Obviously there's exceptions, but, and this kind of leads to, kind of talking in economics terms, but then kind of getting it into the kind of the nitty gritty about basically why do we have the supply problem? I think there's this somewhat conflation of where we've almost extended the property rights of a building out to people who live nearby. And you're seeing this a lot with the rise of NIMBYism, or not in my backyard movements. And it seemed there's a few, I fundamentally disagree with basically everything they have to say. But it seems that for many other areas or products, people like having more options of those things, right? You go to a grocery store, there's a ton of options of cereal, whether you want the really sugary cereal or the healthier versions or granola, oats, all of these variety of options in one particular product. People like having a new restaurant when they open up in the area, new shops, new gadgets for their kitchen. People love more stuff. People love being able to afford more things. So why is that not the case for housing? Why is that? It seems to be kind of the one area where like, oh, we actually don't need more of that. No, we're good. Like, like we like all the other stuff, but like, no, we don't need more housing.
Yeah. I'm gonna give you two economic tools to kind of think about why we don't get more housing, and the NIMBYism is one huge part of it. It's hard to quantify like what's the exact amount that NIMBYism has on reducing the housing supply, only because when a planning and zoning board decides how many units they're going to allow on a certain acreage, or they set these density rules, it's hard to know like what their pure intentions are, like what's in their heart when they write these rules. They all claim that this is about public safety and neighborhood aesthetics, etc. So it's hard to quantify exactly what comes from NIMBYism, but which I'm glad to talk about because it plays a big role. But let me give you two examples. Think about Robert Higgs' ratchet effect idea, which is the idea that after every crisis, government grows, it expands, it's got a solution to the crisis, but it never shrinks back. Okay. So in other words, that government movement is like a ratchet in that it moves in one direction and then it locks once it gets bigger. This is absolutely the case with housing and building codes. Okay. Housing and building codes only get stricter. They only require buildings to be safer. They only require buildings to be more energy efficient. And all of that additional safety and the additional complexity and the additional energy efficiency translates into additional expense, the additional design expense, additional construction expense, maintenance expense, etc. And those codes, like it is never been, I can't think of any example where the code has gotten more relaxed such that the building could get slightly less safe in exchange for being more economical. The building codes and regulations only move in one direction. The same with any kind of environmental impact law, only moves in one direction. And there's great reasons why the people writing those laws are incentivized for those laws to only move in one direction, because they're anytime they're punished, we make the law stricter, and they're never rewarded for instances where the law is not too strict. And the other thing that's going on is there's a real Ouch and Allen effect in the production of housing. So just unpack that a little bit for the audience. The idea behind the Ouch and Allen effect, or the third law of demand, is that when you raise the fixed cost of doing something, that it becomes relatively cheaper to produce the higher quality good in a set of goods. So if you've got something a low quality good and a high quality good. You raise the fixed costs of producing both. The high quality good actually becomes cheaper to produce. Let me walk through an intuitive example with you. Let's say that we're going to build an apartment building, and we've got a choice. We could build luxury apartments, or we could build kind of run-of-the-mill workforce apartments, okay? The square footage of the units isn't going to be that much different. And you know what is the same? A lot of the things are the same in those units. We're going to need to buy the same dirt, all right? And when we buy the same dirt, maybe it's not in the same part of town, but we got to get the same environmental study. We got to run the same sewer lines. And when the city asks us to put in sidewalks, we got to put in the same kind of sidewalks. And you know what? When we put shingles on the roof are not that different, if different at all. The windows may be a little different, but not that different. And when we run the plumbing lines and drain lines in that building, the drain line for the bathtub or the toilet or the kitchen sink in a $1,200 a month apartment is the same PVC pipe put in by the same code as the $2,500 a month apartment. And when we need to run copper lines for the lights and the outlets in the $1,200 a month apartment, it's the same code, it's the same electrician, it's the same copper than if we're running it in a $2,500 a month apartment. So you see, as the price of those materials go up, like plumbing materials, copper, etc., and as the price of labor goes up for plumbers, electricians, architects, etc., it becomes relatively cheaper to go ahead and buy the luxury stuff. Like if plumbers are 25% more expensive or copper is 25% more expensive, I might as well go ahead and build the luxury rental apartment because that's where I'm going to get better profit margins. So as these things become more expensive in general, there is a bias toward supplying housing that is on the upper end of the quality spectrum. And that's just price theory, right? That's just economics. There's no specific regulation causing that bias.
Yeah, I think both of those examples are very interesting. And yeah, like you said, like especially, whether there's just the pure infrastructure of what's going to be in every single apartment or every single house, as well as all the regulations, right? All those fixed costs add up to where even if you wanted to build affordable at the margin, right, it's still going to be more expensive because you've added all those fixed costs associated with it. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think when it comes to housing, I think you nailed it right on the head of like what's really going on and why do we see this kind of movement towards, some people saying, all right, well, you could build that, but over there, right? I don't want traffic to be more. I don't want, more, college students living near me. Like, I don't want more, I don't want these houses turned to dorms. Like, I want them to live somewhere, just not near me. On the other hand, with all these other products, people love having grocery stores near them, and they're willing to pay more to be near shopping centers or grocery stores or insert, whatever amenity that you like. For example, here in New Orleans, living near Audubon Park is way more expensive than living not near Audubon Park, just because people like going to that park. And that's an amenity that people are willing to pay for. So let's talk about that, both the conversion of you from academia to entrepreneur, but also specifically HotelShift, the conversion from hotels to apartments. So can you give kind of the background on how HotelShift started? And then how did you kind of find or discover, right, the entrepreneurial discover process from Kerzner? How did you find this hotel to apartment conversion strategy? And I want to give kind of how I see the explanation, and feel free to correct me if there's something I'm missing. So the way I'm understanding it is that you and your group buy distressed hotels or hotels that, tend to have not worked out as hotels, or they probably wouldn't try to be selling them in the first place. You renovate them into more affordable housing. You lease it. You get a multifamily appraisal instead of the hotel appraisal. You refinance. And that kind of core insight there is this cap rate arbitrage where you're getting better returns on multifamilies versus hotels. Did I get that right? And then how did that kind of process, reveal itself to you?
That's exactly right. And I would just maybe maybe refine the language a little bit in that you're not getting better return on multifamily. Multifamily is actually more expensive. What you're getting is a higher earnings multiple. So the multifamily income stream is more expensive. The return is actually lower. So when you move a hotel and get it recategorized a multifamily or refinanced, then now all of a sudden someone has to pay they're willing to pay a larger premium for the multifamily income. But because you've bought it at a hotel basis, when you switch over to multifamily, you're arbitraging between the low hotel price and the premium multifamily price. So our returns are better because we're not having to pay the expensive multifamily price.
Gotcha. Okay. So how did you discover this process? What was kind of the key insight, the moment that you were like, oh, this works?
Yeah,
Let's do this.
Okay. Well, the key insight is fundamentally academic, and then the execution is very practical. But the key insight is really twofold. It's one, like we talked about, there's NIMBYism, where there are places where it is just politically unsavory to supply more housing. And it is especially politically unsavory to supply more affordable housing, either lowercase a affordable or capital A affordable, which in the real estate world means that it's subsidized. So that's unpopular politically. Then you've got the ratchet effect of laws only becoming more restrictive. Then you've got this Alch and Allen effect. And all of this is a recipe for how I don't know how long-term providing housing gets cheaper. I mean, maybe rents go up and down in a given year just as markets fluctuate, but there are significant macroeconomic trends. There are significant headwinds that are going to prevent us from providing more affordable housing and low-cost housing without some unsustainable subsidy. So that I understood. And then I came to learn only because I went to a conference and someone said to me, why don't you go look at this hotel that's for sale in Michigan? It's so cheap, I think it can be converted into a multifamily. And I thought, that sounds like an enormous pain in the ass, but I will go look at the hotel with you. So I go and look at the hotel, and this particular hotel was only being marketed for like $32,000 to $35,000 per room. Okay, and after I looked at it, I thought, this is a huge pain in the ass. We are going to rezone the hotel. We are going to empty out all the guests. We are going to tear up every room. We are going to put a kitchen in every room and sprinklers in every room. And then we are going to lease this thing all the way up. And then we are going to refinance it. And we have to have money to do all of this in the interim. And you have to have like a couple-year vision to get this done. But I did what I thought a good entrepreneur does, and that is just sit down and try and put prices on these different problems, right? I tried to figure out, are all these problems worth fixing? Perhaps it's worth paying the price to fix those problems, overcome those obstacles I just described. And it turns out that when you can pay $35,000 for a hotel room, right, where multifamily is selling for $300,000 a unit, you can afford to fix a lot of problems. And you can even afford to profitably fix a lot of problems if they're very high prices.
Yeah.
And then
you can internalize the pain in the ass cost, basically.
That's exactly right. You can internalize it. And it's like, it's worth it. And so then I came, and then of course I'm asking, but why is this not a $20 bill on the sidewalk? Why is this market inefficiency persist? What is the friction that I'm not seeing? What am I underestimating? And if I really have found a diamond in the rough here, then this is not a strategy that's repeatable, that can scale. So what is the core differentiator? Like, what's the core reason this arbitrage exists? And I come to study the hotel industry, and I come to understand that hotel income, man, it goes like this. It's very volatile, right? And even hotels that are well run and the hotel income is not volatile, hotel is fundamentally an operating business that is very dependent on management. dependent on the brand to bring in customers. You're dependent on a good manager to give customers good experience. And you're dependent on management to keep costs under control. Okay. So because it's management independent and because the cash flow stream is not as durable, the multiple that is put on hotel income is lower than the multiple that's put on multifamily income. Think about fundamentally every business is valued based on how much cash it generates, and some multiple is put on that business income that is a reflection of how fast is the business growing and how durable is the income stream. Well, guess what? An apartment building, really darn durable income stream, especially in a major city. Like, people need to live somewhere, especially in this day and age, and they pay every month. They sign up to pay for 12 months at a time. You don't have to go out and acquire new customers. It's very easy to project what your revenue and expenses are going to be. So there's a very high multiple that's placed on multifamily income, amongst the highest multiples in all of commercial real estate are on multifamily income. So there's a natural arbitrage between the hotel price and the multifamily price because they're two different businesses, right?
Yeah.
So if you can buy the hotel and pay the hotel multiple, and if you can buy a distressed hotel that no hotel person wants, no lender wants to lend on, they've already built a new hotel down the street, this hotel doesn't have a future as a hotel, and then you can rezone it and convert it to multifamily, you're paying a very low price, a hotel price, and then when you release it as a multifamily, you're getting the higher multifamily multiple on your newly created income stream. And I realized, okay, that is a durable trade. If I get good at solving that arbitrage opportunity requires some skill and knowledge to solve. So it's going to exist in a market. It's not going to get arbitraged away. And I thought, I'm going to make a business out of this because now I'm not competing with hotel people and I'm not competing with every other person trying to buy apartment buildings or build apartment buildings, right? And I am going to become the leading expert in the economics of old hotels and how exactly you get them converted to multifamily. And so we decided to build a niche and a brand around doing exactly that. That's not to say I don't like other types of apartment complexes, like glad to invest in apartments. I even do some investing in traditional hotels. I've invested with friends of mine in regular hotels, and I think those can be compelling investments too. But my lane as the entrepreneur is in buying the distressed hotel to convert to apartments. That's our niche.
Yeah, that's your niche. That's kind of where you found the marketplace, and that's where you're competing. And I think that's really fantastic. So when it comes down to looking at a particular area, is there like certain kind of metrics that an area, where the hotel actually exists, has to kind of exist, or is it really just based off of the price of the hotel and kind of what do you see going forward?
Yeah. So fundamentally, there are a lot of metrics that we look at when we're analyzing a location and a market. And I can talk to you about what we like and don't like in a neighborhood, what I like and don't like in a city. And I can give you 35 different variables that we could talk about. But like, there's one really important variable. And as an economist, you'll appreciate that this one variable pretty accurately captures other stuff. And that is the price of the rent, right? Like if it's a desirable place to live and a lot of people want to rent and want to live there because there's job growth or there's nice amenities, or there's opportunities, then rents are high. And if a supply is constrained, rents are high. So it's not to say that we don't look at job formation and we look at how diversified the economy is, and we don't understand like why people are moving there in the regulatory environment. But the number one thing is how high are the rents? If people are willing to pay to live there, there's a reason, right? So that's a lot of the environment gets compounded into the rent price.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like I think there's actually going back to Armin Alchin, I think there's this quote that he said, if you could remove all of the kind of emissions from this area in Los Angeles overnight, would you do that? And he said, No, because could you imagine how expensive they're going to make the hotel, all the apartments in that area, right? 'Cause given the fact that all these amenities are kind of priced into it, and the price kind of tells you something, right? So yeah, obviously you have supply and demand. If you have constrained supply, that's going to inherently increase or make the rents higher than they otherwise would be if you had more supply. But also at the same note, there's demand, right? People are willing to pay places that they find more attractive, more appealing for a variety of reasons, whether they like, that it's near this great park, or near where they're going to work, or near, where their family is, or near insert whatever metric, right? There's a price people are willing to pay for all these different margins. And this is one of the beautiful things about price theory is all that, you don't need to understand necessarily what percentage of which is coming from one.
Mm-hmm.
The price tells you, get you 95% of the way there, and you can kind of, go from there.
We'll experiment with, pricing those things to like maximize how much we're getting, but just looking at the rent price tells us a ton about the area.
Yeah, exactly. So given, again, going back to this kind of economic training, going to entrepreneurship, kind of want to ask you about those two different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think academics could learn from talking to people in the industries or in the areas that they actually study in the first place?
Yep, it's a great question, and I think that those academics, this is probably no surprise, I think they could come to appreciate what the transactions costs are. I think that people are right to assume, hey, there's transactions costs. These trades don't happen in a vacuum. That's fine. That's accurate. But to describe exactly what the transactions costs are and how entrepreneurs overcome them, I don't know that that's something that academics really understand. Like, when I'm here at a conference right now in New York, a hotel conference, it's very important for me to meet with people that want to sell hotels. It's very important for me to want to meet with brokers, and they need to meet me face to face. And frankly, they are interviewing me, even though I'm the buyer. And I'm interviewing them as the seller a lot of times to see if we want to do business together, because the trade does not come down to the economic terms of who's willing to pay the highest price and send over the cleanest contract. There's these contracts these transactions are so complex that these contracts are so hopelessly incomplete. There's always a gray area. There's always something that no one thought of that comes up, and you want to feel comfortable about who is on the other side of the trade as a buyer and a seller. And you can't just put a tattoo on your forehead that says, I'm a competent and trustworthy person, right? Like, there's asymmetric information. So you've got to signal, and you've got to break down that asymmetric information by building relationships. So I spend a lot of time building relationships. I don't know that I don't want to stereotype too widely by saying academics, but when I was an academic, I don't know that I really appreciated that you can't put trust in a microwave. And that I do spend a lot of time now building trust with people and negotiating.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Because at the end of the day, if you think about it from a seller's perspective, I want to sell this property, and even if someone offers a higher price, but even in terms of the best, okay, this is going to be the best return. But what if you just don't? There's something about them that you can just tell that they're going to make the kind of intermediary period between agreeing on the letter of intent to actual sale. They're going to make it difficult. They're going to come back, try to nitpick on all these little things, and they're going to have a high probability of getting out of the deal in the first place. Well, then you just wasted potentially 2 to 3 months, perhaps even longer, depending on the type of deal, going through this process when you could have just taken the slightly worse offer, but with someone who you've had a stronger likelihood of seeing that they're actually going to go through with it at the end of the day. Because that's all, kind of in its own priced in as well. Like, the lost potential income waiting those however many months it takes to then go back on the market, sell it again, find a new buyer. Having the type of interconnectedness, networking, social capital, trust, whatever you want to call it, matters a lot. So what about the flip side? What do you think people in industry could learn from policy wonks or academics that are in their area?
Yeah, I think that this is probably not surprising and this is not everybody in industry, but these people don't always think systematically about an issue. They know their specific area very well, but they're not really thinking in terms of abstract tools about how could this idea of efficient markets apply more broadly than just in the area that I know about? Or what caused this burdensome regulation? And is burdensome regulation appearing in other areas? What's the incentive, right? Versus just, we have the wrong person in power, right? So I think that thinking systematically about incentives and thinking systematically really about the institutions that created those incentives, that's that level of abstraction. You don't always get the time to sit down and think that through in the hustle and bustle of the business world. And people, especially leaders that are making big strategic decisions, they have come to understand those well, in my opinion. But other people could study them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, let's switch fully to kind of a lightning round type question where there's going to be a few questions, and just however much you want to expand on it, feel free to go ahead.
Sure.
So first lightning round question is economics based. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of economists of all time? Top 4.
Yeah, top 4. So definitely number 1 is Hayek, and very close. Number 2 is Mises. And number 3, this is such a cliche answer. Number 3 is James Buchanan. Love James Buchanan. Learned a lot from James Buchanan. And it's number 4 spot. There's so many great people out there that I owe intellectual debt to. But the first 3, a lot of intellectual contribution, I think, to reward a more practical contribution. And I'm going to say Thomas Sowell, who's maybe the greatest living economist, and has just been so influential for so many people. Even people I meet that are far removed from academia know who Thomas Sowell is and have a great opinion of his books. So I don't know that we can really appreciate the influence that he's had on a popular audience. So he's number 4.
Yeah, I think those are great answers. I always go back and forth on if I say Milton Friedman or Sowell, because I always kind of decide for basically what they did for public intellectualism of economic ideas. They both had tremendous impacts.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think those are great answers. Differ just a little bit. I have Becker in there.
Okay.
But Becker or Alton Allen.
Yeah. That's great. Great choices. Great choices. Yeah. And Milton Friedman, if I had one more spot, he'd be next.
Yeah. It's hard to pick, right? It's like it's definitely hard to pick there. What do you think is the most important book an economist should read that isn't economics based?
Yeah, that's tough because most books I read are fundamentally economics based, and the books that I think are most important are economics based. So I think that everybody the economists, they really should read the Walter Isaacson biography of Elon Musk and just understand the pain and the risks and the fortitude that is required to be an entrepreneur at that level, to be that kind of visionary. I don't know that again, the bearing uncertainty that is required to be an entrepreneur, I don't know that that's neatly captured in an economic model. I don't know that we celebrate risk taking enough, or that we encourage people to take enough risk. We're certainly doing a a good job in this country encouraging it. We could probably do it even more. And I don't know that you can come to appreciate what I'm saying about celebrating taking risks or celebrating doing hard things without reading a detailed biography of somebody that has done a lot of hard things. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. No, I like that answer. I like any Walter Isaacson book I'm interested in. I'm a little biased. He lives in New Orleans, so a little biased there.
But say it. He's at Loyola teaching, right? History or English?
Tulane.
Oh, Tulane. Okay.
Yeah. But still, they're next door neighbors. Close enough.
Right.
So who do you think is the best economist or kind of popular writer working on housing economics or housing and zoning and housing affordability?
Yeah. Housing, zoning, affordability, just, I don't know of that there's that many people writing academically about affordability. It seems like a lot of the people I read have dreamed up some new creative subsidy scheme or like public-private structure that I'm not real excited about as a free market guy. But certainly Ed Glazer at Harvard, it's a wonderful book, Triumph of the City, wonderful about urban economics. And then Jane Jacobs wrote wonderful stuff about cities as spontaneous order and really wrote about urban planning from more of a spontaneous order, free market, emergent order type perspective. And I would recommend them on housing as the top two.
Oh, those are great ones. Mm-hmm. In deals, what's the biggest deal killer that you've seen, at least in underwriting? Zoning, construction costs, financing, something else?
Yeah, a lot of things kill deals. I mean, I'll just tell you, we try and have about 20 offers out at all time. We don't always have 20 offers out, but we always, we regularly have good 10 offers out there. And at all points in time, we try and have a good dozen or so hotels in the pipeline that we're working on because they can very easily evaporate. Our goal right now is to buy around 4 hotels a year. And these deals get killed by all kinds of stuff. What's killing deals is changing only because I'm getting better and better at this and I'm know what to look for up front. I'll tell you about some stuff that kills deals pretty immediately, where we don't spend a lot of time on it or get under contract on it. And a big deal killer is a parking requirement. So a parking ratio. For example, or you may not know, most cities have a rule that says for every apartment, you need 1.25 spaces or 1.5 spaces of parking, right? There's a ratio that is literally codified. There are a few major metros that don't have this rule. I could count them on one hand. I mean, Minneapolis is one, Denver's one, San Jose, California, but or not San Jose, Oakland, California. But this is a standard rule that there is a parking requirement. And hotels are not designed to run at 100% occupancy. And therefore, they don't always have one parking space for every room. Furthermore, a hotel may have people that arrive on an airport shuttle or in an Uber, or maybe they have a family that rents 2 hotel rooms and comes in 1 car. So it's common for a hotel to not have as many parking spaces as rooms or to have a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes we're looking at an old hotel that has a banquet center or a restaurant, and because it had a banquet center or a restaurant, it's got extra parking. But in other cases, the city will say to us, you don't have enough parking. You need to add more parking. And there may not be enough land to do it. It is, pardon my language, it's asinine. It's a deal killer. It's like I've said to these, I've gotten frustrated with some city planners and said, I asked them, do you guys ask Walmart how many cash registers they're going to have in the front of their store? Like what? Why are you not worried about them having too few cash? Why are you not worried about long lines in Walmart? Oh, no. It's because The profit motive and the price system is going to encourage Walmart to put the right amount of cash registers at the front of their store. Like, why can't you guys trust me? And the price system, like, forget about trusting me. Why can't I rely on the price system to figure out how many parking spaces I need? Maybe people want a cheaper unit that doesn't come with a dedicated parking space.
Yeah.
And
if
if
they
you're
don't have a
worried
car,
about too many people, right, or they don't have a car, or if you're worried about too many people parking on the street, that's fine. Let's create a rule. We can't let people park on the street. We can solve for that externality. Like, this is a solvable problem, but that's a difficult one. And that's probably the biggest one that kills deals. In some cities, there are very burdensome energy requirements that that are just too expensive for us to comply with. That would require retrofitting the HVAC system in a hotel to make it more efficient, or changing the lighting, the things of that nature that just kill deals. And then deals are often killed because the city just does not want it rezoned to housing. And whether they want to say it or not, there's a stigma that we don't need more affordable units, no matter what they say publicly. We don't need more affordable units. We don't want people of lower income. They're going to call the cops more. They're going to overrun the schools. They're not going to pay a lot in taxes. They're not net contributors. We don't want to be known as an affordable town. Like, we want people with high incomes that pay a lot of taxes, and the affordable building can be somewhere else. So that unfortunately is another deal killer.
Yeah. No, those all make sense in many ways. Mm-hmm. So if you were going back to, kind of building off of this, if you were like housing czar of insert city, and you could change one or two policies overnight to fix, or at least help alleviate some of the housing zoning issues going on, what would those policies be?
Yeah, I would have multifamily zoning by right. That's what I would do. So, and this is what we have basically in Texas. It's a fantastic new law where, so let me just, for the non-real estate audience, by right zoning means that if something is zoned by right, you don't have to ask the city's permission to build a structure with that use on that piece of land. You have the right to do it. You still have to comply, of course, with building code, and you still have to follow safety rules. But in terms of how the land is used, you have a right to use it in a certain way. So in Texas, there's a new law came into effect last November, and any parcel in Texas that is zoned commercial, if you want to put housing on it, it's zoned for housing by right. That is at the state level. So a city cannot stop you from redeveloping any building, any structure into housing by right. You have to comply with local laws, which still may include requirements on green space or parking or other ridiculous stuff, but you have the right to do it. So I would implement, and they've come out with something very similar in Florida. It's not quite as good as the Texas law, but I would implement that. And this is more and more of a problem. My close second would be that we would eliminate what's called impact fees. So right now in some cities, when we say we want to create more units of housing, they want us to pay an impact fee or a tax. And they say, you're going to put more pressure on the school. That's $5,000 a unit. You're going to use more water. That's $10,000 a unit. You're going to use more of the parks. That's $500 a unit. And then they hand you this bill and say, if you want to do this conversion, you need to pay a one-time tax of X number of millions of dollars. That's ridiculous. Whatever usage that the building would, additional stress that the building would put on public services, those should just be paid on a consumption basis. Like if we're using more water, bill us for more water, right? New development shouldn't have to fund the infrastructure or the capital planning of these cities. And the Supreme Court has come out and said that you can't just go and tax developers with these impact fees that are not based on the actual costs that the development is causing. So in other words, there's got to be a very clear line between you asking me, Alex, to pay $2,000 a unit because the city has to make a water system upgrade. Well, you can't just tax me $2,000 a unit. There's got to be a very clear reason why it's $2,000 a unit. I don't know that that's a good enough solution. I'd rather see the tax structure be different, but certainly we need to rein in impact fees, and that has killed deals for us previously.
Yeah, I mean that one is pretty wild because, like you mentioned, if you end up using more water, you're still going to end up paying more for water anyway.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
It's like, you're going to use more of the water. Be like, well, we'll get charged more.
That's right. And these things are like veiled attempts to kill our project because they don't want more affordable housing or more housing in general. Because we've had in some cases like engineering reports that show when you are using a hotel room, it might be used by a couple different people during the day. Like you might have 3 people stay in a hotel room. You might have somebody in the morning and a different group in the evening, uses all kinds of water, runs the shower extra long, leaves the faucet on. Like, they're not as careful as if it was their own home. There's some moral hazard. Shock. So the energy consumption at these hotels with the water is not even as much as the multifamily. Or these cities whine at me for wanting to increase the traffic count. It's like, well, we can have a third-party engineer show you that actually there's more traffic to a hotel than an apartment building because people come and go from a hotel all the time. And so they back off on that. But the impact fee is annoying structure-wise, but it's not. It's like a bootlegger and Baptist situation. Like what they're really guarding against with the impact fee is that they don't want more housing of lower income people.
Yeah. Yep. That unfortunately makes too much sense.
Mm-hmm.
So last question, is there a particular market or area in the U.S. right now that you're looking at in your strategy that you think either investors are kind of sleeping on or you think just have kind of this potential great opportunity, or you're seeing the signals of like, okay, you think that this area is going to be much better the next 5-10 years?
Yep. I will answer your question. I will just say that in general, we don't think about it that way. Like, I don't really step back and say, I really like these cities. I want to invest in these cities because of these macroeconomic tailwinds. Like, it's much more micro than that. I'm looking for the deal. I've got hotel brands that I like. And so we're looking for deals on those hotel brands. We're looking for certain kinds of distress where we know we can buy the hotel very cheaply. And then we're looking for rent levels, and we're looking for neighborhood characteristics. And once I see those two that I like, then we zoom out and look at what I like in the market. So so just so you know, that's more of the decision process. But at a market level, maybe some things that would surprise you that I like is right now we are pretty excited about Denver. Long term, we're very excited about Texas. What might surprise you is that we like northern New Jersey. And even though that's bluer, it's more regulated, it's less landlord friendly. Long story short, the rents are just high. And the cap rates, in other words, the multiple that is put on multifamily income is also very high because it's so hard to build. So because it's so hard and so expensive to build, and there's so much demand for it, that's an advantage for us, right? We have an unfair advantage there. We've got a little bit of moat around our business. Our comparative advantage really shines. And in northern New Jersey,
because you're not having to build, you're not building from scratch, right? You're renovating a building, so it's different than trying to find a vacant lot of land in northern New Jersey, which I imagine is probably pretty hard.
Yes.
Not only just finding that land is hard, but also then trying to convince somebody to do something that allowing the city to let you do something with it in the next phase anyway.
Yes, exactly. And so you've got and you've also got a pretty crowded hotel market. So crowded hotel market with really high rents and a decent population growth. There's a strong pool of buyers that want to buy those apartment buildings from us once it's converted. So we are we're looking pretty aggressively. I'm actually touring 11 different hotels in northern New Jersey tomorrow.
Oh wow! Okay, well that sounds like a fun time, and best of luck there. Well,
you.
Alex, this has been a really fantastic conversation. I appreciate all of your great insights and hope all the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks again to Alex Cartwright for a great conversation with the From Ideas to Innovation podcast. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please drop a comment below, check out our show notes on our Substack, and please like and subscribe this episode.